In the shadowed halls of Harrington Manor, nestled amid the misty English countryside of 1932, a piercing scream shattered the evening calm. Lady Evelyn Harrington, the elegant hostess renowned for her priceless sapphire ring, a gem said to curse its bearers with betrayal, lay lifeless in her opulent drawing room. The ring, a brilliant blue heirloom passed down through generations, had vanished from her finger. Was it theft, murder, or the sapphire's legendary treachery come to life? As the local constable fumbled with his notebook, whispers of foul play rippled through the assembled guests. Little did they know, the great Hercule Poirot was en route, his little gray cells already stirring with suspicion. Chapter 1. The Shadowed Manor. The fog clung to the ancient stones of Harrington Manor like a shroud, weaving its tendrils through the gnarled oaks that lined the drive and muffling the distant hum of the world beyond. It was a night in early autumn 1932, when the English countryside seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating some unspoken calamity. Harrington Manor, perched on a low hill overlooking the wind-swept moors of Devon, had stood for centuries, a sprawling edifice of weathered granite and ivy-cloaked towers, its windows glowing faintly like wary eyes in the gathering dusk. The house had seen better days. The Harrington family, once lords of the land and patrons of the arts, now whispered of faded fortunes and whispered scandals. But on this evening, the manor's shadowed halls were about to become the stage for a tragedy that would echo through its corridors for years to come. Inside the opulent drawing room, where the air hung heavy with the scent of beeswax polish and dying roses, Lady Evelyn Harrington lay slumped in her favorite armchair by the fireplace. The flames in the grand hearth had dwindled to embers, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls adorned with tapestries depicting long-forgotten hunts. Lady Evelyn, a woman of striking beauty even in death, her auburn hair pinned in an elegant chignon, her silk gown of deep emerald pooling around her like spilled ink, appeared almost serene. Calluses of years of hard labor, Eliza had entered the drawing room at precisely 9:15 p.m. to clear away the tea service. Her scream had pierced the quiet like a shard of glass, echoing through the manor and summoning the household in a flurry of hurried footsteps and alarmed voices. Now she stood in the corner, wringing her apron in trembling hands, her face pale as the moonlight filtering through the fogged panes. Inspector James Japp of Scotland Yard arrived shortly thereafter, his arrival announced by the crunch of tires on the gravel drive outside. Japp was a burly man in his 40s, with a ruddy complexion, a neatly trimmed mustache, and an air of pragmatic efficiency that belied his occasional frustration with the more eccentric methods of his Belgian colleague. He had been summoned by the local constable, a young man named Hargreaves, who now hovered awkwardly by the door, notebook in hand, looking utterly out of his depth. Japp's overcoat was damp from the mist as he stepped into the room, his keen eyes immediately assessing the scene. "Right then," Japp said briskly, his voice carrying the clipped tones of a Londoner unused to rural silences. "Let's have a look at this mess. Hargreaves, you said it was the maid who found her?" The constable nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. About half an hour ago. She screamed bloody murder. Beg pardon, sir. And we all came running. Lady Evelyn was just there, like that. No sign of a struggle, but she's cold now. Been gone a couple of hours, I'd wager." Japp knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb anything, and examined the glass with a gloved hand. He sniffed it cautiously, then grimaced. "Smells bitter. Could be poison. Arsenic, maybe. I've seen enough of that in my time." We'll need the coroner down here sharpish." He straightened up, surveying the room more closely. The armchair was slightly askew, as if pushed back in haste, and a small side table bore a faint scuff mark on its polished surface. "Any sign of forced entry? Windows locked?" Hargreaves shook his head. "All secure, sir." "Touch nothing, I swear." Japp nodded, jotting notes. "And the ring?" Hargreaves mentioned something about a missing sapphire. Eliza's eyes widened slightly. "The sapphire ring, yes, sir. Lady Evelyn's pride and joy. It's an heirloom, big blue stone, set in gold. She always wore it, especially evenings like this. But it's gone, slipped right off her finger, or so it seems. The jewelry box on the vanity there." She gestured to a nearby mahogany dressing table, where an ornate wooden box sat open, its velvet lining empty of the prized piece. "It's not in there. I checked after I saw her." Japp's brow furrowed. This added a layer of complexity. Murder with robbery? Or something more personal? He turned as footsteps approached from the hallway, heavy and deliberate. Lord Reginald Harrington entered the room, his face a mask of controlled anguish. A man of about 50, with a stiff mustache that matched the rigid set of his shoulders. He was dressed in a tailored dinner jacket, though his tie was slightly askew, a rare sign of disarray for a man known for his impeccable demeanor. His eyes, sharp and gray, flicked over his wife's body before averting to the inspector. "Ah, Inspector Japp," Reginald said, his voice steady but laced with strain. He extended a hand, which Japp shook briefly. "Thank you for coming so promptly. This is unimaginable." Evelyn was the heart of this house. Japp sympathized with a nod. "My condolences, Lord Harrington. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask. When did you last see your wife alive?" Reginald hesitated, glancing at the portrait above the mantel as if seeking guidance from his forebears. "She retired early, around 7:30. Complained of a headache during dinner. I suggested she take some rest before our guests arrived for bridge tomorrow. I heard nothing amiss until Eliza's scream." His gaze darted briefly to the empty jewelry box, and Japp noted the flicker of something. Worry? Guilt? In his expression. Rumors in the village spoke of a stoic figure in his black tailcoat, his silver hair impeccably combed, and his face an impassive mask. He was in his late 50s, with the quiet authority of long service. 30 years to the Harringtons by all accounts. "May I be of assistance, Inspector?" he inquired, his voice smooth and measured, betraying no emotion. Japp eyed him appraisingly. "For now, just stay put. We'll need statements from everyone." Graves inclined his head and withdrew, but not before Japp noticed the subtle glint of a cufflink. A small sapphire inlay. Perhaps a coincidence, but worth remembering. The door to the drawing room creaked open again, admitting a younger man who burst in with the energy of restrained panic. Neville Harrington, Lord Reginald's nephew and heir presumptive, was in his late 20s, handsome in a rakish way with tousled dark hair and a jawline that spoke of better days. His evening attire was slightly rumpled, as if he'd been interrupted mid-stride, and his eyes, wide and earnest, betrayed a mix of grief and something sharper, like desperation. "Uncle Reggie, what's all this?" Neville asked, his voice pitching higher as he caught sight of Lady Evelyn. He stopped short, hand to his mouth. "Aunt Evelyn. Good God. Is it poison, likely?" Japp interjected before Reginald could respond. "Sit down, Mr. Harrington. We need to talk." Neville complied, sinking into a nearby chair, his hands clasped tightly. I was in the billiard room, like Uncle said, heard the scream and came running. Aunt Evelyn. She was like a mother to me after my parents passed. And that ring, she promised it to me once, for my engagement to Clara. Said it would bring luck, despite the curse nonsense. His voice cracked on the last word. But Jap wondered if it was genuine sorrow or the fear of exposure. Neville's gambling habits were no secret. Whispers in London clubs placed his debts in the thousands, and the Sapphire Ring, valued at over £10,000, could settle them neatly. Before Jap could press further, families, betrayals over its possession. But curses are mere folklore, of course. She glanced at the body with clinical interest rather than horror, which Jap filed away as potentially telling. Indeed, Jap replied dryly. And where were you when it happened, Doctor? In the library, cataloging some references for Evelyn. She wanted a full appraisal of the ring's provenance before insuring it properly. I heard the scream and arrived moments later. Her alibi seemed solid, but Jap noted the way her fingers tightened on her notebook, a subtle sign of unease. The room now buzzed with quiet tension. The suspects, Lord Reginald, Neville, Eliza, Dr. Voss, and the ever-present Graves, forming a loose circle around the inspector. Hargreaves had stepped out to telephone the coroner and, more importantly, to summon reinforcements from Exeter. But Jap knew this case would require more than local constables. The Harringtons had connections in high places, and a murder in such a setting demanded discretion. As he pondered his next move, a telephone rang distantly in the hall, Hargreaves answering it with a hurried, "Yes, sir, right away." Moments later, the constable poked his head in. "That was from Scotland Yard, sir. They've dispatched Monsieur Poirot. Says he's en route and will be here within the hour." Jap sighed, a mix of relief and exasperation crossing his features. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with his penchant for order and his infamous little gray cells, was a brilliant ally but an acquired taste. Bloody hell. All right, keep the scene secure. No one leaves the manor until we've spoken properly. As the group dispersed slightly, Reginald to pour himself a stiff brandy from the sideboard, Neville to stare blankly at the fire, Eliza to hover by the door, Dr. Voss to flip through her notebook, and Graves to vanish into the shadows, Jap took a moment to absorb the atmosphere. The manor felt alive with unspoken secrets, the weight of debts, the allure of a cursed gem, the frictions of a household bound by blood and service. Lady Evelyn's background added another layer. Born into minor his breath. Dr. Voss adjusted her spectacles, her mind clearly turning over possibilities. Lord Reginald raised his glass in a silent toast to his departed wife, but his eyes remained dry. As the hour wore on, a distant howl pierced the night. Perhaps a fox on the moors, or merely the wind whistling through the eaves. But in the shadowed manor it sounded like a harbinger. The household held its breath, secrets festering in the dark, awaiting the arrival of the one man who could illuminate the treachery within. Chapter 2. The Belgian Intruder. The crunch of gravel under polished patent leather shoes announced the arrival of Hercule Poirot at Harrington Manor, his silhouette emerging from the swirling fog like a figure from a Dickensian tale. It was just past 11 o'clock on that fateful autumn night of 1932, and the air was thick with the damp chill of the Devon moors. Poirot, diminutive yet commanding, adjusted his immaculate overcoat and tilted his egg-shaped head, his green eyes gleaming beneath the brim of his Homburg hat. His mustache, meticulously waxed, quivered slightly as he inhaled the scent of impending mystery. A chauffeur-driven Daimler had brought him from the station at Exeter, where Inspector Japp's urgent telegram had found him concluding a less intriguing matter involving a stolen cameo. Now, as he stepped onto the manor's threshold, the Belgian detective felt the familiar tingle of his little gray cells stirring to life. "Mon ami Japp," Poirot greeted, his voice rich with a continental lilt as he extended a gloved hand to the inspector, who stood waiting in the grand foyer. The space was all oak paneling and flickering gaslight, with a sweeping staircase curving upward into shadow. "You summon me to a scene most tragique, a lady of refinement, poisoned, and her jewel of legend vanished. It is a puzzle worthy of Hercule Poirot, n'est-ce pas?" Japp, his ruddy face etched with fatigue, managed a wry smile. "Good to see you, Poirot. You've a knack for showing up when things get messy. Come." "Fingerprints, but hers, though. Could be suicide, but the missing ring complicates things. Stolen after death, perhaps?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of polite disagreement. "Suicide? Non, non, mon ami. A woman such as Lady Evelyn, adorned with vanity and pride, does not depart this world without her cherished sapphire. The ring, it is not merely a jewel, it is a symbol, a legacy. Its absence suggests intention, calculation." He straightened, his small frame radiating authority. "And observe, the chair. It is not aligned with the table, as if pushed in haste. A struggle, perhaps subtle, occurred here." Japp raised an eyebrow but jotted a note. "You see struggle where I see a fainting spell. But go on, Poirot. Who do we talk to first?" Poirot's gaze settled on Lord Reginald Harrington, who had just re-entered, his brandy glass now empty but his demeanor no less guarded. "Monsieur Harrington, if you please," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. Reginald complied, sitting stiffly, his gray eyes wary under heavy brows. "Monsieur," Poirot began, his tone deceptively genial. "Your wife, she was the center of this household, oui? Yet I hear whispers of financial strain. The manor, it is mortgaged, and the sapphire ring, insured perhaps, might ease such burdens. Tell me of your evening." Reginald bristled, his mustache quivering like a cornered animal. "Preposterous insinuations, sir. Yes, we've had debts. Who hasn't in these times? The crash of '29 hit us hard, and the estate's upkeep is ruinous. But Evelyn's death solves nothing. Her will leaves everything to me, true, but I loved her dearly. I was in the garden smoking my pipe when she retired. I heard no scream until Eliza raised the alarm." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The garden, at 8 in the evening, in this fog. A curious choice for a stroll. Nothing more." Her voice broke, and she dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, but Poirot noted the steadiness of her hands. Resentment, perhaps? Servants often saw more than they admitted. "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, waving her back. He moved to the vanity, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the jewelry box. There, caught in the hinge, was a single hair, blonde, fine, unlike Lady Evelyn's auburn locks. He plucked it carefully, holding it to the light. "Curieux," he whispered. "A clue or a distraction?" Japp, watching, scratched his head. "Blonde hair? Could be Dr. Voss, she's the only blonde here, but I could have been there for days. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. In the house of such meticulous order a hair lingers unnoticed? No, mon ami. It is fresh. Deliberate, perhaps. He pocketed the hair in a small envelope, his mind already weaving possibilities. Next he summoned Neville Harrington, who slouched into the room, his boyish charm undercut by a sheen of sweat on his brow. The young man's tailored suit was creased, and his fingers fidgeted with the cigarette case he didn't open. "Monsieur Neville," Poirot said, his tone almost paternal. "You are in debt, I hear. Debts that weigh heavily. Your aunt, she promised you the ring for your betrothed, oui? Yet it is gone, and you were alone in the billiard room. Tell me, what did you hear?" Neville's eyes flickered with defiance, then softened. "I was shooting billiards, yes, to clear my head. I owe money in London, cards, horses, bad luck. Aunt Evelyn knew, lent me some to tide me over, but she was cross about it. Said the ring would be mine when I proposed to Clara, but only if I shaped up. I didn't kill her, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the billiard room until the scream. Ask anyone." Poirot tilted his head. "Anyone, monsieur? You were alone, I believe. And the billiard room, it is near the garden door, no? Easy to slip out, perhaps." Neville flushed. "I didn't, I swear it. Once." Her alibi was consistent, but Poirot's instincts whispered of concealment. Finally, he beckoned Mr. Graves, the butler, whose stoic presence seemed to anchor the room. "Monsieur Graves, you are the silent observer of this household. 30 years of loyalty, oui? Yet your cufflink, a sapphire chip. A curious choice." Graves' expression remained impassive. "A gift from the late Lord Harrington, sir, Evelyn's father. I was polishing silver in the pantry when the mistress died. I heard nothing until Miss Thorne's cry." Poirot nodded, dismissing him but noting the butler's unshakable calm. Too calm, perhaps? As midnight approached, Poirot retired to a guest room prepared for him, a modest chamber overlooking the fog-draped gardens. Sleep eluded him. His mind churned with details. The blonde hair, the scuffed table, the tobacco flecks, the sapphire's curse. The Manor's silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of floorboards overhead. Someone pacing, or something more sinister. He lit a small lamp and examined his notes, sketching a timeline. Lady Evelyn retired at 7:30, tea served at 8, death likely by 8:15, scream at 9:15. The poison, arsenic, Japp suspected, required minutes to act, suggesting it was administered close to her final moments. A red herring emerged in his thoughts, the tobacco near the body. Reginald's pipe, yes, but too conveniently placed. And the blonde hair, Voss's likely, but planted to mislead. Poirot's method demanded order, symmetry, yet this case was a tangle of motives. Reginald's debts, Neville's desperation, Eliza's resentment, Voss's greed, Graves's enigmatic loyalty. He rose, donning his dressing gown, and stepped into the corridor. The manor was a labyrinth of shadows, its portraits watching like silent sentinels. A faint sound, a creak from the landing above, drew his attention. He moved silently, his small frame blending with the darkness, and glimpsed a figure retreating into the gloom. Friend or foe? The curse of the sapphire seemed to whisper through the theft of her legendary sapphire ring. The tangle of motives among the household had set his little gray cells alight. The manor was a stage, its players poised for revelation or ruin, and Poirot, with his meticulous method, was determined to uncover the truth behind the treachery. He descended to the library, where the household was to gather at his request. The room was a cavern of knowledge, its towering oak shelves groaning under leather-bound tomes of history, folklore, and genealogy. A faint mustiness hung in the air, mingling with the scent of polished wood and old parchment. The library's tall windows admitted a feeble light, filtered through the fog, and a fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the assembled suspects. Inspector Japp stood by the hearth, his notebook open, his expression a mix of skepticism and anticipation. The others, Lord Reginald Harrington, Neville Harrington, Eliza Thorne, Dr. Amelia Voss, and Mr. Graves, sat or stood in uneasy silence, their eyes darting to Poirot as he entered with the quiet authority of a conductor before a symphony. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, his Belgian accent lending each word a precise cadence. He stood before a lectern, a small stack of notes in his gloved hand, though he rarely glanced at them. "The death of Lady Evelyn is no accident, no suicide. It is murder, deliberate and cunning. And the theft of her sapphire ring is not merely a crime of greed, but a clue to the heart of this treachery. Let us begin with the ring itself, its legend, its weight upon this house." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. "The sapphire, it is said, carries a curse of betrayal, passed through the Harrington line since its acquisition in India during the Raj. Lady Evelyn's grandmother, Lady Beatrice, met a similar fate, poisoned, they say, amid whispers of infidelity and greed. Madame Evelyn believed in this curse, did she not?" The young man's dark hair was disheveled, and his fingers toyed nervously with a cigarette he hadn't lit. "Monsieur Neville, you spoke of your aunt's promise, the ring for your engagement to Mademoiselle Clara. Yet your debts in London, they are substantial, oui? Did you press her to sell it?" Neville's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with indignation. "I never pressed her. Yes, I owe money, cards mostly, some bad bets at Ascot. Aunt Evelyn lent me funds, said the ring would be mine when I settled down with Clara. She wanted me to reform, not to sell her precious heirloom. I'd never harm her, Monsieur Poirot. She was family." His voice cracked, but his gaze held a spark of defiance that Poirot noted carefully. "Yet you were alone in the billiard room," Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but probing. "No one to confirm your alibi between 7:30 and the scream at 9:15. The billiard room. It is near the garden door. A convenient exit, perhaps?" Neville flushed, his hands clenching. "I was there, I swear it. Practicing shots to keep my mind off things. Ask Graves. He passed by earlier." Poirot's eyes flicked to the butler, who stood near the door, his posture as rigid as the oak paneling behind him. Mr. Graves, with his silver hair and impassive face, seemed an extension of the manor itself, unyielding, eternal. "Monsieur Graves, you confirm this?" Graves inclined his head slightly. "I did see Master Neville in the billiard room around 7, sir, when I was checking the windows. I was in the pantry afterward, polishing silver, until the scream." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Dr. Amelia Voss. The gemologist sat primly, her blonde hair coiled tightly, her spectacles catching the firelight. Her notebook lay open on her lap, as if she were preparing a lecture rather than facing a murder inquiry. "Madame Voss, you are a scholar of gems. You spoke with Lady Evelyn about the ring's provenance. Tell me more." Voss adjusted her glasses, her voice crisp and academic. The sapphire voice trembling, but resolute. "Begging your pardon, sir, but I overheard something yesterday." Lady Evelyn and Dr. Voss were in the drawing room, talking heatedly about the ring. Madame said something about not trusting appraisals, and Dr. Voss looked right cross. Voss's eyes narrowed. A professional disagreement, nothing more. Evelyn was stubborn about her heirlooms. Poirot raised a hand for silence, his mind sifting through the exchange. A new clue had emerged during his morning inspection. In Lady Evelyn's study, hidden behind a false panel in her desk, he'd found a ledger detailing financial transactions. Entries showed loans to Neville, thousands of pounds, partially repaid, and cryptic payments to an AV, totaling several hundred over the past year. Blackmail? Or something more mundane? He chose not to reveal this yet, letting the suspect's tensions simmer. Instead, he addressed the group collectively. "The ring's curse, it is said to bring betrayal. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in curses, only in human nature, which is far more treacherous. Let us consider. Who among you stood to gain from Madame Evelyn's death and the ring's theft?" The room tensed. Reginald's jaw tightened. Neville's cigarette trembled in his fingers. Eliza's hands twisted her apron. Voss's pen paused mid-note, and Graves remained a statue, though Poirot noted the faintest glint of his sapphire cufflink. A red herring surfaced. Jap, hovering nearby, mentioned a letter found in Lady Evelyn's desk, accusing Reginald of an affair with a London socialite. "Blackmail material, perhaps?" Jap suggested. Poirot dismissed it with a wave. "Too obvious, mon ami. A distraction meant to muddy the waters. The true clue lies in the mundane, the overlooked." He turned to Graves. "Your cufflink, monsieur. It is a sapphire chip, oui? A gift, you said. But from whom?" Graves' voice was steady. "From Lord Harrington, Evelyn's father, for my years of service. I've been with this family 30 years, sir. Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his mind cataloging her words. A clue? Or another misdirection? Voss's interest in the ring was undeniable, but was it scholarly or sinister? The morning wore on, the fog outside refusing to lift, as if the manor were trapped in a timeless limbo. Poirot's thoughts turned to the timeline. Lady Evelyn retired at 7:30. Tea served at 8. Death by 8:15. Scream at 9:15. The poison, arsenic as Jap's nose suggested, required minutes to act, meaning the killer was present or had planned meticulously. The blonde hair in the jewelry box, likely Voss's, nagged at him. A careless mistake or a deliberate plant? As he pondered, a sudden crash from the attic above broke the silence. A heavy thud, like a trunk overturned. The group froze, eyes darting upward. Jap started for the stairs, but Poirot raised a hand. "Calme, mon ami. It is perhaps a servant, or perhaps something more." His voice was steady, but his eyes gleamed with anticipation. The manor's secrets were stirring, and the sound above hinted at hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. He led the way to the attic stairs, his small frame moving with surprising agility. The others followed, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. The attic door creaked open, revealing a dusty expanse of trunks, cobwebs, and forgotten relics. A single window let in a sliver of gray light, illuminating a toppled crate, its contents, old letters and photographs, spilled across the floor. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers sifting through the papers. A letter, yellowed with age, caught his eye. A love note from Lady Evelyn's youth, signed by a suitor long gone. Beside it, a newspaper clipping detailed a jewel theft from decades past, with a young Graves mentioned as a suspect, though acquitted. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The past whispers loudly today. He tucked the clipping away, his mind racing. Web of suspicion around the household, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge of disentangling truth from deception. The attic's spilled secrets, uncovered just hours ago, had added new threads to the tapestry. A love letter from Lady Evelyn's youth, a newspaper clipping hinting at Mr. Graves's shadowed past, and the ever-present specter of the Sapphire's curse. Poirot stood by a rosewood writing desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of a discovery made during a quiet search of Lady Evelyn's private study. A hidden ledger, concealed behind a false panel in a drawer. Its pages, meticulously kept in her elegant hand, detailed financial transactions that painted a picture of a family teetering on ruin. Entries listed loans to Neville Harrington, sums in the thousands, only partially repaid, and cryptic payments to an AV, totaling several £100 over the past year. There were also notes on the Sapphire Ring's insurance, recently increased to cover its estimated value of £10,000. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. Betrayal financial, perhaps. A motive as old as time. He summoned the household to the library once more, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Inspector Japp leaned against the mantel, his notebook worn from constant use, his patience visibly fraying as the case grew more complex. Lord Reginald Harrington sat rigidly, his gray eyes fixed on the portrait of his late wife, as if seeking absolution. Neville Harrington paced near the windows, his youthful energy curdled into nervous agitation. Eliza Thorne hovered by the door, her apron smoothed but her eyes darting with unspoken fears. Dr. Amelia Voss sat with her notebook, her scholarly composure intact but strained, while Mr. Graves stood like a sentinel, his sapphire cufflink catching the firelight. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice a calm anchor in the room's tension. The puzzle of Lady Evelyn's murder grows clearer, yet more intricate. The ledger, it reveals the pressures of this house. Debts, billiard room. Convenient, no? Before Neville could protest, a new clue surfaced, courtesy of Japp's earlier search. The inspector stepped forward, holding a small glass vial labeled arsenic, found in Eliza Thorne's apron pocket during a routine check of the servants' quarters. Care to explain this, Miss Thorne? Japp asked, his tone stern. Eliza's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth. That's not mine, sir. It's rat poison, kept in the pantry for the vermin in the cellars. We've had a plague of them this year. Someone must have slipped it into my pocket. Her West Country accent thickened with panic, and she looked to Poirot, pleading. I swear, sir, I'd never harm Madame Evelyn. She was strict, yes, but fair. Japp moved to detain her, but Poirot raised a hand. Patience, mon ami. This vial, it is too convenient. A red herring, planted to divert suspicion. The true killer is more subtle. He turned to Eliza, his gaze softening. You prepared the tea, mademoiselle. Did you notice anything unusual in the drawing room? Eliza hesitated, then nodded.
The tea tray was as usual, but Madame's vanity table. There was a powder compact open, which was odd. She never used face powder, said it was vulgar. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Curieux. We shall return to this. He dismissed Eliza, noting her relief, and turned to Dr. Voss. Madame Voss, the ledger mentions payments to A.V. Your initials, perhaps? For what purpose? Voss's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on her notebook. I have no knowledge of such payments. Evelyn consulted me on the ring's appraisal, nothing more. If A.V. is me, it's news to me. Her voice was steady, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease behind her spectacles. And your argument with Lady Evelyn? He pressed, recalling Eliza's earlier revelation. You were seen examining the ring closely. Voss adjusted her glasses, her tone defensive. A professional disagreement, as I said. I suspected the sapphire had a flaw, an inclusion that could lower its
footprints. Deep, deliberate, matching the size and tread of Graves' polished shoes. Monsieur Graves, he said, turning to the butler, you claim to have been polishing silver in the pantry, yet footprints in the garden suggest otherwise. Explain. Graves' face remained impassive, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight. I inspected the garden earlier, sir, to ensure the gates were secure. The fog was thick, and we've had trespassers before. I was back in the pantry by 8. His voice was smooth, but Poirot noted the precision of his words, as if rehearsed. A new clue emerged as Poirot revisited the drawing room during a brief recess. In the hedges outside the garden door he found a torn glove, gray wool, with blonde fibers caught in its weave, matching the hair from the jewelry box. Voss's hair, perhaps, or another misdirection. He pocketed the glove, his mind racing. The ledger, the vial, the compact, the footprints, the glove, each piece was a thread in the tapestry, but the pattern remained elusive. As noon approached, Poirot gathered the suspects again, his tone grave. The sapphire ring. It is not merely stolen. It is a key. Its absence suggests a motive beyond greed. Who among you knew its true value, not in pounds, but in power? The room tensed. Neville's cigarette trembled. Eliza's hands twisted her apron. Voss's pen scratched a nervous note. Reginald sipped his brandy, and Graves stood unmoved. Japp, sensing the mounting pressure, interjected with another red herring. A rumor from the village that Lady Evelyn had enemies among London's jewel dealers, envious of her collection. Could be an outsider, Japp suggested. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The poison, the timing, the ring's removal, all point to someone within these walls. An outsider would leave traces, broken locks, disturbed earth. Here, we have only silence and subtlety. He turned to Voss again. Madame, you spoke of the ring's flaw. Did you share this with others? The opportunity. As the group dispersed for lunch, Poirot lingered in the library, examining the ledger again. The payments to A.V. were irregular, often coinciding with visits from Dr. Voss. Blackmail? Or payment for services rendered? He recalled the addict's clipping. Graves passed as a suspected jewel thief, though acquitted. Could loyalty mask old habits? A sudden gust rattled the windows, the fog pressing closer, as if the manor were sealed from the world. Poirot's thoughts turned to the timeline. Tea at 8. Death by 8:15. Scream at 9:15. The poison speed suggested a concentrated dose, likely administered in the drawing room. The compact was a possibility, but the tea remained the likely vehicle. Yet Eliza's innocence seemed plausible, her panic genuine. As he pondered, a faint creak from the hallway drew his attention. A door closing softly, or a footstep. He stepped into the corridor, his small frame alert, but saw only shadows. The manor was alive with secrets, and the killer was among them, their treachery hidden in plain sight. Chapter 5. Echoes in the Night. Thunder rumbled over the Devon moors, a low growl that seemed to rise from the earth itself, shaking the ancient bones of Harrington Manor. The fog, relentless since the previous day, pressed against the windows like a living thing, trapping the household in a cocoon of suspicion and dread. It was the evening of October 7th, 1932, and Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the storm's ominous chorus, paced the dimly lit corridors of the manor, his polished shoes silent on the worn Persian rugs. The murder of Lady Evelyn Harrington, poisoned, her sapphire ring stolen, had woven a tapestry of motives, each thread leading to a suspect. Lord Reginald's deaths, Neville's desperation, Eliza's resentment, Dr. Voss's greed, or Mr. Graves' enigmatic loyalty. The ledger, the blonde hair, the torn glove, and now the attic's secrets had deepened the puzzle, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge of unraveling it. The day's revelations had sharpened his focus. The hidden ledger, with its cryptic payments to A.V. and loans to Neville, pointed to financial strain as a motive. But the poison, likely arsenic, delivered in the drawing room, suggested a more personal betrayal. The powder compact, open on Lady Evelyn's vanity despite her aversion to face powder, hinted at a subtle method, and the blonde hair in the jewelry box implicated Dr. Voss, though Poirot suspected misdirection. The attic's spilled crate had yielded a letter from Lady Evelyn's youth, and a newspaper clipping about Graves' past as a suspected jewel thief, acquitted decades ago. Each clue was a piece of the mosaic, but the pattern remained elusive. Poirot's investigation now turned to the attic, where the crash hours earlier had suggested hidden truths. He ascended the narrow staircase, his small frame illuminated by a single oil lamp, its flame flickering in the drafty air. The attic was a labyrinth of dust and shadows, its low beams festooned with cobwebs, its floor littered with... The household was restless, and Poirot sensed the killer's growing unease. Returning to the library, he found Inspector Japp nursing a cup of tea, his face etched with frustration. "This case, Poirot," Japp grumbled. "It's like chasing fog. Everyone's got a motive, but the evidence is slippery. That arsenic vial in Eliza's pocket. Too obvious, you said. But what if she's cleverer than she looks?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "No, mon ami. The vial is a plant, meant to mislead. The true method is more refined. Consider the powder compact. Lady Evelyn despised such cosmetics, yet it was open, its contents disturbed. Arsenic, perhaps, applied to the lips, a method feminine, subtle." Japp's eyes widened. "Lipstick, or powder transferred to the glass. That's devilishly clever." "Précisément," Poirot said, pacing. "But who had access to the vanity? All were in the drawing room at some point, but the timing, between 7:30 and 8, is critical." He summoned Eliza Thorne first, her sharp features pale in the firelight. "Mademoiselle,
You mentioned overhearing Monsieur Neville threaten your mistress. What were his words? Eliza's hands twisted her apron, her voice low. I was passing the drawing-room door yesterday afternoon. Master Neville was inside, pleading with Madame Evelyn. He said, "You'll regret this if you don't help me." She laughed, called him a reckless boy. He stormed down, face red as a beet. Poirot turned to Neville, who had entered, his cigarette now lit, its smoke curling like a spectre. Is this true, monsieur? Neville's jaw tightened. I was upset, yes. I begged for another loan, the ring even, to sell. She refused, said I needed to face my debts like a man. But threaten her? No, I'd never harm her. His voice was fervent, but his eyes betrayed panic. Poirot nodded, filing the denial away. He called Dr. Voss next, her scholarly poise intact but strained. Madame, your alibi,
Monsieur, the ledger shows your desperation. The ring's insurance, your salvation, oui. Yet you claim to have been in the garden. Reginald's face darkened. I was, smoking my pipe. The fog was thick, but I needed air. Evelyn and I argued earlier. About money, yes, but I'd never harm her. His voice cracked, but Poirot noted the steadiness of his hands, as if accustomed to hiding emotion. A red herring emerged. Jap produced a pipe cleaner found near the body, its fibers matching Reginald's tobacco pouch. You were in the drawing room earlier, sir, Jap said. Care to explain? Reginald shrugged. I smoke everywhere. It must have fallen from my pocket during dinner. Poirot waved it off. Another distraction, mon ami. The tobacco. It is too convenient. He turned to Graves, whose stoic presence seemed to anchor the room. Monsieur Graves, your past, the jewel theft accusation. You were cleared, yet the sapphire's theft now raises questions. Where were you truly at 8? Graves' silver hair gleamed, his voice unwavering. In the pantry, as I said, polishing silver. I've served this family 30 years, sir. My loyalty is unquestioned. His sapphire cufflink glinted, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Loyalty, oui. But to whom? Poirot murmured. He dismissed the group, his mind racing. The compact's powder was key. He had tested it discreetly, finding traces of arsenic in its contents. The poison had been applied there, transferred to Lady Evelyn's lips, perhaps when she touched her face or sipped the tea. A method requiring intimacy with her habits, access to her vanity. As night deepened, the storm intensified, lightning illuminating the manor's Gothic arches. Poirot revisited the drawing room, his lamp casting long shadows. The glass, the compact, the scuffed table, all pointed to a staged scene. But the killer's precision was faltering. He examined the fireplace, finding a faint burn mark, a scrap of paper perhaps, destroyed to hide evidence. The thought lingered, unproven. Returning to the library with a smile, not fear, but anticipation. The killer was nervous, their composure cracking. He gathered the suspects once more, his voice calm but commanding. The curse of the sapphire. It is said to bring betrayal. But Hercule Poirot sees only human treachery, greed, fear, revenge. This note, he held it aloft, is proof the killer is among us, watching. But they underestimate the little gray cells. The room was electric with tension. Neville's cigarette fell. Eliza gasped. Voss's pen froze. Reginald's glass trembled, and Graves' eyes flickered, barely, but enough. Poirot's net was tightening, but the killer's next move was unclear. Had they hidden the ring, planted more clues, or was the figure in the garden a sign of flight? As the group dispersed, the storm's roar seemed to echo the manor's secrets. Poirot retired to his room, his lamp burning low, his mind weaving threads. The compact's poison, the ledger's payments, the attic's past, the note's threat. The sapphire's curse was a myth, but its power to incite betrayal was real, and the killer's desperation was palpable. Chapter 6. The Fractured Alibis. The storm over Harrington Manor raged on, its thunderclaps shaking the ancient walls as if urging the truth to break free. By the morning of October 8, 1932, the fog had thinned slightly, but the air remained heavy with suspicion, each gust through the moors carrying whispers of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the menacing note slipped under his door the previous night, "Leave or share her fate," stood in the library, his small frame a beacon of order amidst the chaos. The murder of Lady Evelyn Harrington, poisoned with arsenic, and her sapphire ring stolen, had woven a complex web of motives. Lord Reginald's financial ruin, Neville's gambling debts, Eliza's resentment, Dr. Voss's greed, and Mr. Graves' shadow cutting through the room's tension like a scalpel, his Belgian accent lending each word a precise cadence. The alibis, they fracture like glass under scrutiny. Each of you claims innocence, yet the truth lies in the cracks. Let us examine these cracks, He paced before the lectern, his notes untouched, his mind a labyrinth of logic. He turned first to Neville, whose fingers twitched as if longing for his cigarette. "Monsieur Neville, your alibi, the billiard room, alone. Yet I observed the billiard cue in the rack this morning. It bears a fresh scratch, as if used to pry open a window. Perhaps the garden door nearby." Neville's face paled, his voice rising. "I was practicing, I swear. The scratch, maybe I hit the table too hard. I didn't go near the drawing room." His eyes darted to the others, seeking allies but finding only suspicion. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Curieux, monsieur. A vigorous practice, yet no one heard the clack of balls. We shall return to this." He turned to Eliza, her sharp features taut with anxiety. "Mademoiselle Thorne, you claim the arsenic vial in your pocket was planted. Yet you served the tea, and you overheard Monsieur Neville's threat. Did you also overhear others?" Eliza nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Mr. Graves with the ring earlier that day, sir, in the drawing room. He was polishing it for Madame Evelyn, but he held it a long time, staring like it meant something." Her eyes flicked to the butler, then away. Graves stepped forward, his tone cool. "Routine duty, sir. Lady Evelyn often asked me to clean her jewels. I returned the ring to her immediately." His sapphire cufflink caught the light, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A routine duty, oui, but with a jewel so prized," Poirot mused. He shifted to Dr. Voss, whose pen had stilled in her notebook. "Madame Voss, your alibi, the library, then the lecture in Exeter. Yet the telegram's timing is ambiguous. You returned early, perhaps in time for sale, but for another purpose. Who among you knew its true value?" Jap, seizing the moment, pressed Voss. "You're the gem expert, Doctor. You said the sapphire was flawed, less valuable than thought. Were you planning to swap it with a fake? Voss's face flushed. Absurd. I appraised it honestly. Evelyn knew it was flawed. She planned to expose fakes in my collection, yes, but I didn't kill her for it. I wanted the ring for study, not theft. Her admission hung in the air, a partial confession of motive. Poirot turned to Reginald. Monsieur, the ledger shows the ring's insurance as your lifeline. Yet you were in the garden, where footprints matching Monsieur Graves' shoes were found. Were you truly alone? Reginald's voice was strained. I told you I was smoking, clearing my head. The debts. They overwhelmed us. But Evelyn's death solves nothing. The insurance requires the ring, and it's gone. His hands trembled, betraying more than his words. Poirot's gaze shifted to Graves. And you, monsieur? Your footprints, your past as a suspected thief, though acquitted. Did old habits resurface? Graves's eyes flickered, but his voice remained steady. I've served this family faithfully, sir. The footprints were from checking the gates. I've no interest in jewels beyond my duty. His sapphire cufflink gleamed, a silent challenge. A red herring dissolved as Poirot re-examined the powder compact. The arsenic, he confirmed, was laced into the powder, not the tea, a method requiring intimate knowledge of Lady Evelyn's habits. The tea, tested by the coroner, who had finally arrived, was clean, shifting suspicion from Eliza. The compact, Poirot said, is the key. Who touched it? Eliza shook her head. Not I, sir. I don't use such things. Voss echoed her. Nor I. Powder is beneath my notice. Reginald and Neville claimed ignorance, and Graves merely bowed, silent. Eyes darted away. She paid for my expertise. Nothing more. But her hands betrayed her, clutching her notebook tightly. Poirot turned to Eliza, whose earlier testimony about Graves lingered. Mademoiselle, you saw Monsieur Graves with the ring. Did you see others near the vanity? Eliza hesitated, then nodded. Dr. Voss was there, sir, after their argument. She was looking at the compact, I thought, but I was busy with the tea. Voss bristled. I was checking the ring, not cosmetics. The net tightened. Poirot's timeline refined. Lady Evelyn retired at 7:30, tea served at 8, death by 8:15, scream at 9:15. The compact poison suggested a window of opportunity just before the tea, when all were milling about post-dinner. The setting in the fireplace pointed to a rushed theft, the gem pried out to obscure its trail. As evening fell, the storm's fury peaked, lightning illuminating the manor's Gothic arches. Poirot gathered the suspects for a final round. The alibis, they crumble. Monsieur Neville, your scratched cue. Madame Voss, your forged credentials. Monsieur Graves, your footprints. Monsieur Reginald, your debts. Mademoiselle Eliza, your access. Yet, one detail escapes. Why discard the setting? Japp interjected, holding a new find. A pawn ticket from Neville's coat, dated a week prior, for a sapphire brooch. Trying to raise funds, lad? Japp asked. Neville stammered. That was Clara's brooch, not the ring. I pawned it to pay a debt, nothing to do with Aunt Evelyn. Poirot waved it off. Another distraction, mon ami. The true clue is the compact, its poison, its placement. He paused, his eyes scanning the group. Tonight we shall test these alibis further. A reconstruction, perhaps.
to see who flinches. The gunshot's echo lingered in the stormy night, a sharp crack that sent a shiver through Harrington Manor's ancient walls. The tempest outside roared with unrelenting fury, its lightning flashes casting stage for Poirot's intensified interrogations. Jap, his patience worn thin by the case's complexity, stood by the hearth, his notebook nearly filled with scribbled observations. The suspects, Lord Reginald Harrington, Neville Harrington, Eliza Thorne, Dr. Amelia Voss, and Mr. Graves, sat or stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of guarded emotions. The gunshot had heightened their unease, and Poirot sensed the killer's desperation growing, their composure cracking under his relentless scrutiny. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a measured cadence that commanded attention, his Belgian accent lending each word a precise weight. "The alibis, they fracture further, and the clues, they converge. The gunshot, it is a distraction, but it reminds us that danger lurks. The Sapphire Ring's theft, the poison in the compact, the ledger's secrets, all point to a betrayal most intimate. Let us lift the veil, oui?" He turned first to Dr. Voss, whose scholarly poise had begun to unravel. Her blonde hair, neatly coiled, caught the firelight, reminding Poirot of the hair found in the jewelry box. "Madame Voss, the blonde hair, yours, I believe, found in the jewelry box. You handled the ring during your appraisal, oui? And perhaps the compact?" Voss's eyes flashed behind her spectacles, her voice sharp. "Yes, I examined the ring as I told you. My hair may have fallen then. It sheds easily. But the compact? I never touched it. I don't use such fripperies." Her hands clutched her notebook, betraying a tremor. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Curieux, madame. Yet the hair was fresh, not days old. And your alibi, the lecture in Exeter. The telegram's timing is vague, and the station logs, they are incomplete. You returned early, perhaps in time to tamper?" Voss's face flushed. "I was in the library by 7:30, as I said. You've no proof otherwise." Her defiance was brittle, and Poirot noted it, moving on. He framed Mademoiselle Eliza. He turned to her sharp features pale but resolute. "Mademoiselle, you saw Dr. Voss near the vanity. Did you see others?" Eliza nodded, her voice steadying. "I saw Lord Reginald there earlier, sir, before dinner. He was arguing with Madame Evelyn. Something about divorce, I think. She mentioned the ring, said it was her leverage." Her eyes flicked to Reginald, then away. Reginald, startled, set down his brandy glass with a clink. "Divorce? Preposterous. Yes, we argued. About money, always money. The Manor's debts are crushing, and Evelyn wanted to sell the ring to save us. I refused. It was her family's legacy. But murder? I was in the garden, smoking when she died." His voice was firm, but his hands betrayed a tremor, and Poirot noted the faint scent of tobacco lingering on him. Poirot turned to Graves, whose stoic presence seemed unshakable, his sapphire cufflink a quiet taunt. "Monsieur Graves, your past, the jewel theft accusation, though acquitted. The ring setting, found in the fireplace, suggests a thief's haste. And your footprints in the garden, checking gates, you said, but at 8, in the fog." Graves' silver hair gleamed, his voice calm. "As I said, sir, I checked the gates earlier, then returned to the pantry. My loyalty to this family is absolute. I had no hand in this." His eyes met Poirot's, unflinching, but Poirot sensed a guarded depth. A new clue emerged as Poirot re-examined the ledger, its pages open on the lectern. The payments to A.V., likely Amelia Voss, coincided with her visits, suggesting blackmail or collusion. He confronted her directly. Madame Voss, the ledger's A.V., your initials. Lady Evelyn paid you, for silence about your forged credentials. Voss's composure cracked, her voice rising. She suspected my degrees weren't entirely legitimate, yes. I studied in Vienna, but some papers were embellished. Evelyn paid to keep it quiet, but I didn't kill her. She was going to expose me, true, but I had no arsenic, no motive.
The tea, clean of poison, shifted suspicion from Eliza. But the compact's placement on the vanity suggested someone with intimate access. Poirot's mind raced. The smudge on the teacup's handle, left-handed, was a clue. Lady Evelyn was right-handed, suggesting force or deception in her final moments. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, pacing. The poison. It was not sipped but touched, perhaps pressed to her lips. A method requiring precision, opportunity. He addressed the group. The teacup's smudge, left-handed. Who among you writes or pours with the left hand? Silence fell. Neville shook his head. Reginald raised his right hand. Eliza mimicked him, and Graves remained still. Voss, however, paused, her pen in her left hand. I'm left-handed, she admitted, but I never touched the compact. Poirot's eyes narrowed. We shall see, madame. He dismissed the group, but not before announcing a plan. Tonight we shall reenact the fatal evening. Each of you will retrace your steps from 7:30 to 9:15. The truth, it will reveal itself. As the suspects dispersed, the storm's roar intensified, rain lashing the windows like a warning. Poirot lingered in the library, his lamp casting long shadows. He re-examined the diary page. A.V. grows bold, threatens exposure. Voss's blackmail was clear, but was she the killer or a pawn? The ring's setting, discarded in haste, suggested a thief caught off guard. Graves' past nagged at him, but his loyalty seemed genuine. Neville's desperation was palpable, but his denials rang true. Reginald's debts and Eliza's access couldn't be ignored. A sudden creak from the hallway drew his attention, a shadow moving swiftly, gone before he could pursue. He stepped into the corridor, his lamp revealing only the manor's portraits, their eyes watching like silent judges. The note's threat echoed in his mind. But Poirot was undaunted. The killer was close, their mistakes mounting. Jap powder compact. The blonde hair, the torn glove, the attic's secrets, and a threatening note had brought Poirot closer to the truth. But the killer's identity remained just out of reach. Now, as the household gathered for Poirot's proposed reenactment of the fatal evening, the threads of the mystery were converging, and the Belgian detective's little gray cells were poised to expose the betrayer. The library, with its towering shelves and flickering firelight, served as Poirot's stage. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook worn to tatters, his ruddy face etched with a mix of skepticism and anticipation. The suspects, Lord Reginald Harrington, Neville Harrington, Eliza Thorne, Dr. Amelia Voss, and Mr. Graves, formed a tense circle, their eyes darting between Poirot and each other. The gunshot from the previous night, revealed as a hunter's mistake, had left them rattled, and the looming reenactment heightened their unease. Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, adjusted his impeccable tie and surveyed the group, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a calm beacon in the storm of suspicion, his Belgian accent lending each word a precise cadence. "The threads of this mystery, they converge. The poison in the compact, the stolen sapphire, the fractured alibis, all point to a betrayal most intimate. Tonight, we reenact the evening of Madame Evelyn's death, from 7:30 to 9:15. Each of you will retrace your steps, and the truth, it will emerge from the shadows." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The suspects shifted uncomfortably. Reginald's fingers tightened on his brandy glass. Neville's unlit cigarette trembled. Eliza's hands twisted her apron. Voss's pen scratched nervously, and Graves stood like a statue, his sapphire cufflink catching the firelight. Poirot's net was tightening, and the killer's composure was fraying. A critical discovery had shifted the investigation earlier that day. Jap, during a search of the servants' quarters, had found this, holding up the torn glove found in the garden hedges, its gray wool laced with blonde fibers. "This glove, it matches the hair in the jewelry box. Madame Voss's, perhaps? Yet Mademoiselle Eliza claims it as hers, lost while gardening. A red herring, but whose?" Eliza's eyes widened. "It's mine, sir, truly. I lost it days ago near the roses. I don't know how it got those fibers." Her West Country accent thickened with panic, but Poirot's gaze softened, sensing her truth. Voss bristled. "My hair is everywhere. I lean close when working. It means nothing." Her left hand gripping her notebook betrayed a tremor, and Poirot noted her left-handedness, matching the teacup's smudge. He shifted to Neville, whose desperation was palpable. "Monsieur Neville, the pawn ticket for a sapphire brooch, yours, you claim, for your fiancée. Yet the ledger shows your debts mounting. Did you plan to sell the ring, perhaps with Madame Voss's help?" Neville's face flushed. "I pawned Clara's brooch, yes, but not the ring. I begged Aunt Evelyn for it, but she refused. I'd never hurt her." His voice cracked, but his eyes darted to Voss, hinting at a connection. Poirot turned to Voss. "Madame, your payments. AV in the ledger. Blackmail for your forged credentials or a scheme with Monsieur Neville? Your expertise with gems suggests you could identify or create a fake." Voss's composure cracked. "I told you Evelyn paid for my silence, but I didn't kill her. Yes, I appraised the ring, suspected a flaw. I offered to test it, but she refused. Neville approached me once, asking about selling jewels, but I declined. Her admission was a jink, and Poirot pounced. "A scheme, perhaps?" he pressed. "Your knowledge of fakes, his need for funds, a partnership?" Voss's eyes flashed. "Preposterous. I'm a scholar, not a criminal." Poirot nodded, letting her stew, and turned to Reginald. "Monsieur, your marriage was strained. Divorce, Eliza overheard. The ring's insurance, your only, was clean." Clearing Eliza. The left-handed smudge pointed to Voss. The ring setting in the fireplace and the gem in Graves' room suggested a rushed theft. The ledger's payments to AV and Neville's debts hinted at collusion. But the diary's note, "AV grows bold," suggested Voss as the aggressor. He announced the reenactment's details. At 7:30, Madame Evelyn retired to the drawing room. Mademoiselle Eliza brought tea at 8. Monsieur Reginald was in the garden, Monsieur Neville in the billiard room, Madame Voss in the library, Monsieur Graves in the pantry. By 9:15, the scream. "We shall recreate these movements and the killer. they will falter. The reenactment began in the drawing room, its velvet drapes and gilded mirrors heavy with the memory of death. Eliza, trembling, placed a tray on the table, mimicking her actions. Reginald stepped outside, his pipe lit, the fog swallowing him. Neville paced to the billiard room, his cue in hand. Voss retreated to the library, her notebook open. Graves moved to the pantry, his steps measured. Poirot and Japp watched, noting every gesture. At 8 o'clock, Eliza poured tea, her hands steady. Voss, returning briefly, lingered near the vanity, her fingers brushing the compact. Neville's cue clacked faintly, but Poirot noted his glance toward the garden door. Reginald re-entered, his pipe smoke curling, his eyes avoiding the vanity. Graves appeared carrying a silver tray, his presence silent but commanding. By 8:15, the critical moment, Poirot halted the scene. Here, the poison was administered. The compact, it was tampered with. By whom? He scanned the group, their faces taut. Voss's left hand twitched, Neville's cigarette fell, Reginald's pipe trembled. Eliza's eyes darted, and Graves remained still. A new clue emerged, a smudge of powder on Voss's glove, unnoticed until now. Madame Voss, Poirot said, his voice sharp. Your glove. Powder from the compact, oui? You touched it, despite your denials. Voss paled. Voss's greed. Neville's debts. Reginald's desperation. Eliza's access. Graves' past. The killer was among them, their betrayal exposed by their own mistakes. Chapter 9. The Grand Revelation. The rain had softened to a mournful drizzle, cloaking Harrington Manor in a veil of mist that seemed to mirror the secrets within its ancient walls. By the evening of October 8, 1932, the grand drawing room was ablaze with anticipation, its velvet drapes drawn back to reveal the storm's fading glow, its gilded mirrors reflecting the tense faces of the gathered household. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating an almost theatrical authority, stood at the room's center, his green eyes gleaming beneath his polished Homburg hat. The murder of Lady Evelyn Harrington, poisoned with arsenic, her sapphire ring stolen, had drawn a tight net around the suspects. Lord Reginald's financial ruin, Neville's gambling debts, Eliza's quiet resentment, Dr. Voss's scholarly greed, and Mr. Graves' enigmatic loyalty. The ledger's payments, the poisoned compact, the blonde hair, the torn glove, the attic's secrets, a threatening note, and the ring's recovery in Graves' quarters had brought Poirot to the cusp of truth. Tonight's reenactment had shaken the suspects, and now, in this grand revelation, Poirot's little gray cells would expose the killer's treachery. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his notebook clutched like a lifeline, his ruddy face a mix of exhaustion and hope. The suspects, Lord Reginald Harrington, Neville Harrington, Eliza Thorne, Dr. Amelia Voss, and Mr. Graves, sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their postures rigid, their eyes darting between Poirot and the empty jewelry box on the vanity. The sapphire ring, recovered from Graves' room, lay on a velvet cushion beside Poirot, its deep blue facets catching the firelight like a malevolent eye. The reenactment had revealed subtle cracks. Voss's powder-smudged glove, Neville's nervous glances, Reginald's trembling hands, Eliza's thought put in the powder compact on her vanity, applied to her lips. The ring, her prized heirloom, was stolen post-mortem, its setting discarded in the fireplace, the gem hidden in Monsieur Graves' quarters. A note threatened my life, and clues, hair, glove, ledger, pointed to all of you. But only one hand wove this web, He turned to Eliza, whose sharp features were pale, her hands clutching her apron. Mademoiselle Thorne, you brought the tea. You claimed innocence, and the tea was clean, confirmed by the coroner. Yet you saw Madame Voss near the vanity, oui? Eliza nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, sir. She was there, looking at the ring, maybe the compact. I was busy with the tray, but I saw her linger. Her eyes flicked to Voss, then away, fear mingling with accusation. Poirot turned to Voss, whose scholarly poise was crumbling, her left hand gripping her notebook. Madame Voss, you are left-handed, as the smudge on the teacup's handle suggests. The powder on your glove, the blonde hair in the jewelry box, yours, non? You examined the ring, but also the compact. Voss's face flushed, her voice sharp. I told you, my hair sheds. I leaned close during the appraisal, yes, but the compact? I never touched it. The smudge is coincidence. Her defiance wavered, and Poirot's mustache twitched. Coincidence, madame? No, no. The little gray cells, they reject such excuses. He turned to Neville, whose cigarette lay forgotten, his youthful face drawn with panic. Monsieur Neville, your debts drove you to beg for the ring. You planted the arsenic vial in Mademoiselle Eliza's pocket, oui? To divert suspicion. Neville's eyes widened. I didn't. I pawned Clara's brooch, yes, but the vial. Someone framed me. I loved Aunt Evelyn, even if I begged. His voice cracked, but his glance at Voss betrayed a shared secret. Poirot nodded, shifting to Reginald. Monsieur Harrington, your debts were crushing. The ring's insurance, your salvation. You argued with your wife. About divorce, Eliza overheard. The poison. It was here, arsenic, laced into the powder, transferred to Madame Evelyn's lips as she touched her face, perhaps sipping tea. A method subtle, feminine, requiring intimate knowledge of her habits. The tea was clean, the vial a distraction. The teacup's left-handed smudge, the powder on Madame Voss's glove, the hair, the payments to A.V. They point to one truth. He turned to Voss, his voice sharp. Madame Voss, you are the weaver of this treachery. You appraised the ring, yes, but you also ran a scheme, forging gems, selling fakes through London dealers. Lady Evelyn discovered this, oui? She paid you to keep silent, as the ledger's AV entries show. But she grew bold, threatened to expose you. You argued, as Eliza witnessed. And when she refused to yield the ring, you acted. Voss's face paled, her spectacles slipping. Preposterous. I admitted the payments. Blackmail for my credentials, not gems. I didn't kill her. Her left hand shook, betraying her. Poirot held up a new clue found during the reenactment. A jeweler's loop in Voss's luggage, etched with traces of arsenic powder. This, madame, you used to examine the ring and to lace the compact. You returned early from Exeter, entered the drawing room, and tampered with the powder while Madame Evelyn was distracted. You took the ring post-mortem, pried out the gem, and hid it in Monsieur Graves' quarters to frame him, your rival in loyalty. Voss sneered. Prove it, Monsieur Poirot. You've no evidence. Poirot smiled, producing a final piece. A duplicate sapphire found in Voss's luggage, a near-perfect fake. This, madame, you crafted to replace the real gem. But Madame Evelyn, she noticed the switch, confronted you. Your blackmail payments were not enough. She planned to expose your forgery ring. You poisoned her to silence her, then stole the true sapphire to sell. The room was electric with shock. Japp stepped forward, handcuffed, led Voss away. The manor exhaled, its secrets laid bare. The ring returned to Reginald, gleamed on the velvet cushion, its curse dispelled by truth. Poirot's gray cells rested, satisfied, as the storm outside faded, leaving only the quiet of justice. Chapter 10. The Curtain Falls. The drizzle over Harrington Manor had ceased by the morning of October 9, 1932, leaving the Devon moors glistening under a tentative sun. The ancient house, its granite walls and ivy-clad towers bathed in pale light, seemed to exhale a long-held breath, as if relieved of the weight of its secrets. The murder of Lady Evelyn Harrington, poisoned with arsenic, her sapphire ring stolen, had been solved. The killer unmasked in a dramatic revelation the previous night. Dr. Amelia Voss, the scholarly gemologist, had been led away in handcuffs by Inspector Japp, her confession of greed and betrayal echoing through the drawing room. Yet as Hercule Poirot prepared to depart, a few threads of the mystery lingered, demanding closure. The manor's inhabitants, Lord Reginald Harrington, Neville Harrington, Eliza Thorne and Mr. Graves, gathered one final time. Their faces a mix of relief, grief, and lingering unease. Poirot's little gray cells, though satisfied, were not yet ready to rest, for the case's ripples extended beyond the arrest. The library, with its towering oak shelves and the faint scent of old leather and wood smoke, served as the final stage. The fire in the grate burned low, casting a soft glow on the portrait of Lady Evelyn above the mantel, her painted eyes now seeming to watch with approval rather than accusation. The sapphire ring recovered from Voss's attempt to frame Graves rested on a velvet cushion, its deep blue facets glinting like a promise fulfilled. Poirot stood before the assembled group, his small frame in the light. This gem, it is no curse despite the legends. Its power was in the desires it ignited: greed, desperation, loyalty. Let us revisit the final pieces, He turned to Japp, who leaned against the mantel, his notebook closed, his expression one of grudging admiration. Mon ami Japp, you have the duplicate sapphire, found in Madame Voss's luggage. It confirms her scheme to replace the true gem, Japp nodded, producing the fake, a near-perfect replica, its slight flaw visible only under a loupe. Crafted by an expert, no doubt. Voss admitted she'd been forging gems for years, selling them through London dealers. Lady Evelyn caught wind of it, threatened to expose her. That's what the ledger's AV payments were, hush money, until Evelyn got bold. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément. Madame Evelyn. She was no mere victim of vanity. She was shrewd, discovering Voss's forgery ring through her own inquiries. The diary page, AV grows bold, threatens exposure, was her warning to act. Voss, fearing ruin, laced the powder compact with arsenic, knowing Evelyn would touch her face, transferring the poison to her lips. A method subtle, feminine, deadly. He turned to Voss's absence, her confession still fresh. Madame Voss admitted her crime under pressure. Her left-handed smudge on the teacup, the powder on her glove, the blonde hair in the jewelry box, the forged telegram claiming a late return from Exeter. She hid the true sapphire in Monsieur Graves' quarters to frame him, discarding the setting in the fireplace to suggest theft. But her haste betrayed her. Reginald cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, you've saved us from ruin. But at what cost? Evelyn's gone, and the ring, her legacy, feels tainted now. What becomes of it?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Monsieur Harrington, the ring is yours to decide." Poirot nodded, satisfied. Eliza, standing straighter now, spoke unprompted. "Sir, I never meant to cause trouble. I resented Madame Evelyn's sharpness sometimes, but I'd never harm her. That vial, it scared me witless." Her West Country accent was soft, earnest. Poirot's smile was gentle. "Mademoiselle Thorne, your loyalty to this house is clear. The vial was a cruel trick, but your truth helped unravel it. You are free of suspicion." He turned to Graves, whose stoic presence had been a constant anchor. "Monsieur Graves, your past as a suspected thief raised doubts, but your loyalty proved true. The ring in your quarters, the footprints in the garden, they were misdirections. Why did you not speak of the attic's secrets?" Graves' silver hair gleamed as he inclined his head. "I've served this family 30 years, sir. The attic's papers, old scandals, love letters, they were private, not my place to reveal. I found the ring this morning, as I said, and would have reported it, but I trusted you'd see the truth." His sapphire cufflink glinted, a badge of fidelity. Poirot nodded. "Your silence, it was loyalty, not deceit. The manor is fortunate to have you." He addressed the group collectively, his voice rising with finality. "The sapphire's curse, it was a myth, but its power to incite betrayal was real. Madame Voss succumbed to greed, forging gems to fund her ambitions, blackmailing Lady Evelyn to keep her silence. When Evelyn threatened exposure, Voss acted. Poison in the compact, the ring stolen to cover her tracks. The note under my door, the planted clues, they were her desperate attempts to escape justice. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through such deceptions." Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs idle now that Voss was in custody. "A tidy job, Poirot. The coroner's report confirms the arsenic in the compact, and Voss's confession seals it. She's off to Exeter for trial. But what about that threatening note? Her handwriting." Poirot produced the note, its scrawled warning, "Leave or share her fate." As the group dispersed, the manor seemed lighter, its shadows less oppressive. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the moors. Poirot stepped outside, his suitcase in hand, the Daimler waiting to return him to Exeter. The air was crisp, the storm's remnants fading, and the manor stood resolute, its secrets laid bare.